that we are going to do. Of course, this session is going to be recorded, but this sessions are going to be a two-part series. So this is the first part, of conversations, that we are going to have with early interventions and early identification. And this is the part one, and we are doing identification today. The part two is going to happen next Thursday. So both the parts are very, very crucial, for us to understand, because that's the crucial age that we are talking about of all the children whom we see. There will be polls that we will run, through this session, and one will be at the start of the session, one will come up in the middle, and one is going to be at the end. I request all the participants, attendees, please uh, see that you answer the poll and submit it, so that you are able to press that submit after you respond, so that we get to know your response. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. We would love to know you all and hear from you. Also, if you have any questions, there is a section Q&A, question and answer section. Please type any queries that you have in that section, and we will be happy to take it to the panelist or the speaker that you would want to answer. There will be on and off, if there are any links or any material shared by the panelists, please see that, check your chat box. We are going to put it up on the chat section, so you can access it there. At the end of this session and the next session, Save the Children India will be giving away participant certificates to all. We'll be doing this, before 28th of the month, because we have the next session coming up. So the certificates will be given to all those people who are here today. And if you need to know more about STCI, our link will be posted in the chat section. You can look up on that link, and please look up for us and what kind of work we do. So all that will be, you'll find it over there. In case you need us for anything, any support, you can please get in touch with us. And one last thing, please display your full name, as your phone name or laptop name, so that makes it easy for us to know, whom we are speaking with. So that's done. I'm very excited to start this, session today, because we have a very charming moderator today, for this panel. In our panel, just a request: the first poll is gone up now. Please, respond and then press the submit button. Thank you. So we have with us Shruti Gupta. She has done her, engineering from IIT Mumbai in meteorological and material sciences. Welcome, Shruti. She is currently an app analyst working, with the company. And Shruti Gupta is a cochlear implant recipient since childhood. Shruti, we are so happy to have you with us today. And without taking much time, I'm going to hand it over to you, and keep your charming smile on, and would like to hear from you. Over to you, Shruti. Thank you.
Thank you, Farida. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. So today we will be talking about early identification and intervention for speech and hearing disabilities. So let me introduce a bit more about myself. This is me, Shruti Gupta, speaking here. I am 22 years old, and I have been diagnosed with bilateral profound sensory neural hearing loss since birth. And it was at the age of 1.5 years where I was immediately fitted with hearing aids, and later on I underwent cochlear implant surgery. Thereafter, I underwent rehabilitation and speech therapy sessions to follow up of cochlear implant. And this is where I am here today, moderating this webinar and discussing with you all. So I'll be introducing a bit about the panelists. So today we have with us Dr. Koiri Sengupta. We have with us well-known development pediatrician. She is the director of Autism Intervention Services at UMIT that promotes child development and works with children with disabilities. She constantly communicates with schools, principals, teachers, counselors to advocate for children with special needs for educational concessions, special supervision, and works with NGOs that assist children with special needs to push for inclusion of children in all settings. Welcome, Dr. Sengupta. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Now we have Geeti Char. She is a pediatric audiologist and teacher for babies and young children with hearing loss. She has also previously done tremendous work in the area of newborn hearing screening with Vadia Hospital and other NGO in Mumbai. We welcome you, Geeti, to have you with us in this webinar. Third panelist of this webinar today is Ketki. She is working with the Department of Audiology at Ari Avajang National Institute of Speech and Hearing Disabilities at Mumbai. She is also working as an audiologist and speech language pathologist, which involves all the clinical activity related to evaluation and intervention of individuals with complaints related to hearing. Other responsibilities of Ketki include supervising clinical activities of hearing and PG students posted in the clinics. Welcome, Ketki. We very much look forward to you hearing from you. Now, we also have with us Akansha. Akansha is working as an audiologist and program director for Dhwani Save the Children India. She is directly responsible for complete and comprehensive audiological management of young babies and young children with hearing loss coming to Dhwani from the time they were enrolled in the program till they are mainstream in regular normal school. Welcome, Akansha. We are so thrilled to know about you and what you do for your organization, even in this challenging situation. Okay, so now we start off with the panel discussion. The question we have for you is Dr. Koiri. So the question is, why are the first 3 years, basically, which is usually 1,000 days of child's life, crucial? And why is it called the critical period of development? Over to you, Koiri.
So much, Shruti. First and foremost, may I say a very good afternoon to all the panelists and to all the participants who have joined us for this session. Such a pleasure to be here, and I am looking forward to this session because I hope to learn so much from all of you and from all your shared experiences. I do want to just mention that we are all going through very troubling times, and that to use this platform and this online platform for all of us to stay connected is so wonderful. And I hope all of us are staying safe and staying well. So with that, I do want to go back to Shruti's question about why are the first 3 years so important. I think I've been just looking at some of the people who have been introducing themselves on the chat, and I see that most of you, or probably all of you, are professionals who work in the field of probably child development or rehabilitation or therapy, or probably are some are parents, and you know how important the first 3 years are, because this is the period of maximum brain growth. This is the period when children learn the most. This is an incredible period of brain plasticity for making new connections, and children are learning from all the new connections the brain is making all the time. और मैंने देखा कि कुछ लोगों ने रिक्वेस्ट किया है कि हम हिंदी में भी बात करें, तो हम बॉम्बे वाली हिंदी में बात करेंगे जो थोड़ी सी टूटी फूटी है. आई होप वो सबको समझ में आएगी. तो मेरा यही कहना है कि आप सभी को बहुत बहुत अभिनंदन कि आप लोग सब आए हैं, और मैं आशा करती हूँ कि आप लोग सब कुशल से हैं और सब लोग सेफ हैं। और पहले 3 साल के बारे में श्रुति ने पूछा हमसे, और हमारा यही कहना है कि पहले 3 साल बहुत जरूरी है बच्चे लोगों की जिंदगी में, क्योंकि ये वो पीरियड है, ये वो समय है जब ब्रेन या दिमाग का विकास सबसे ज्यादा होता है। इसको ब्रेन को प्लास्टिक बोला जाता है, क्योंकि ब्रेन और दिमाग की सीखने की क्षमता सबसे ज्यादा होती है। अगर हम बहुत सिंपली इसको एक्सप्रेस करते हैं, तो बच्चे लोग कैसे सीखते हैं? क्योंकि नई नई कनेक्शंस बनती जाती हैं भाषा के बारे में, दूसरे स्किल्स के बारे में। और ये वो पीरियड है जब सबसे ज्यादा कनेक्शंस बनती है। बच्चे लोग उस आसपास से सीखते हैं, स्टिमुलेशन से सीखते हैं। दे आर वायर्ड फॉर न्यू थिंग्स, सो इट्स वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, नॉट जस्ट फॉर लैंग्वेज बट फॉर मेनी स्किल्स। पर लैंग्वेज, स्पीच और लैंग्वेज के लिए ये बहुत ज्यादा सेंसिटिव पीरियड है, क्योंकि ये देखा गया है कि और बहुत सारा रिसर्च हमें बताता है कि अगर इस दौरान बच्चे को सुनाई नहीं देता है, तो फिर सुनना केवल एक कान से जुड़ी चीज नहीं है, एक दिमाग से भी जुड़ी चीज है। तो जो ब्रेन के वो जो एरियाज जो सुनने से जुड़े हुए हैं, अगर उनको साउंड नहीं पहुंचता है, उन तक आवाज नहीं पहुंचती है, तो फिर वो कनेक्शंस जो साउंड और मीनिंग के बीच में बनने के लिए जो जरूरी है, वो एस्टैब्लिश नहीं होते हैं। जिसके वजह से ये 3 साल के दौरान जो सीखा जाता है, वो हम बाद में भी अगर वो उनको एक्सपोज करते हैं, but the learning doesn't happen as much. So इसलिए the first 3 years are so important, because hearing is not just about the external apparatus or the ear, but it is so much about how the brain makes the connections between what it hears and what sense it makes of the meaning of what it hears.
Thank you, Dr. Kohli. It was very insightful. So basically, I think children are the foundation for the future. So basically, the development of the child, the overall development of the child and the personality of the child depends on how the children are being brought up. So I think it's essential part of children's life, the first 3 years of life. Thank you very much. For Katie, we have a question for you. So because of the current pandemic situation, it can further delay the process of early identification. So what can be done to reduce the impact of, delaying early identification and detection?
At AYJ, basically, when this pandemic started, we would not have any control on people from where the people are coming, and they would be coming in like 80s and hundreds each day. So even if we wanted to maintain social distancing, it was difficult there. So actually we stopped the actual OPD services in the second week of March. And for the till 14th of April, I think we were just serving people who had queries, or there was troubleshooting or like that. We were not registering any new cases. Of course, the footfall was also less because everything was under lockdown. So people did not have any means to commute to our institute and undergo the test. After that, even till May, the institute was on and off because we had few positive cases in our campus. So the office was not completely working. We actually properly started working for evaluations and all by around 15th of June. Even then, it was like people who had walked in, we would provide the service. Actual testing for pediatric cases hasn't started as of now, full-fledged, especially ABR and ASSR and OAE, impedance audiometry. All these tests which require a close contact hasn't really started yet. But we are doing informal testing, the behavioral observation testing, VRA, where the parent and child can sit in a two-room setup, and we handle the audiometer from outside and draw some conclusion. Uh, Visiting parents with kids, basically, we haven't had a lot, but yes, there are few kids, parents who have got their 15 days old child or 1 month old child. On any other day, I would be really happy to see parents being aware about doing the hearing testing so early in life. But in this situation, I was a bit skeptical that a parent is ready to get such a young child outside and travel so far to the institute. But both the parents, what we did was basically do a checklist based on which they have an idea if the hearing loss is present or not. And we gave them idea about how to observe the child's responses at home. And we told them we will be contacting them after we start the ABR services.
Okay, even with this challenging times, the organization as AYJ is trying to figure out how the testing and the screenings can be done as an alternative. Okay, for DT, we have a question. So parents typically try to check their baby's hearing at home by doing some homemade test. Especially even something that is done unprofessionally, that is something done which is without any supervision. Do you think it is correct to do so on their part, to conduct homemade tests to detect the hearing in the babies? Over to you,
So, can you hear me? Yeah. So I would not stop a parent from doing any testing because they are anxious. They are suspecting a hearing loss. Today in our country, there's also a situation where the parents don't really know the word audiologist. So they go to their family doctor. So, and they're trying to find out, they don't know that there are degrees of hearing loss. So I can't ever shout at a parent for doing testing at home because I'm sure all parents that I have seen in my life, in my career till now, have tested at home. They have to convince themselves until the period that we start newborn hearing screening and arrange for further follow-up diagnostic testing. So though it may not be right, what we need to do as us as professionals is have quantifiable testing using electrophysiological means and as early as possible, and reduce the bias of the tester, or depending on what equipment you're using. So that's our job, to get it in.
Thank you, Geeti. So yeah, I think even during my time, my parents, when they realized that I was unable to hear, it was a situation during Diwali, and the crackers were bursting. But eventually, it will babies will react to those unprecedented loud noise. So this was something, because I was not reacting to them. My parents realized that there was a bit of skeptical. They were skeptical about in my hearing. So that's where they took immediate action and consulted the audiologists, the doctors, and the surgeons to know what my diagnosis is. So I would stress enough that babies or the young children, if they have any a bit of skepticism in hearing, then they should consult the professionals to take the right actions.
Absolutely. Okay. And these home tests don't catch lesser degrees of hearing loss. Yes. So while we have festivals that are an informal check, which most of my parents tell me, it's not scientific. But parents, we have to get them to know the profession of audiology and audiologists so that they know where to go for hearing testing until hearing testing is part of the norm at birth.
Right, right. So we had a poll session in the beginning of the webinar, and we got the feedback from the participants. So we found that the major participants are audiologists as well as the special educators. So yeah, which is great. And now we have the question for Dr. Koiri. So do you think pediatric hearing loss is considered as serious and leading health concern? And why should we create it as an emergency situation? You know, when a child is having hearing loss, when a parent or when the caregiver know that there is something wrong in the reaction of the babies, do you think that they should immediately take up the action to get their child tested?
Thank you for your question. I will try to speak in English and then possibly again speak in Hindi if that's okay. So I think I would like to address your question in two parts, Shruti. The first thing is once parents come to know that or suspect that a child may have a hearing loss, of course it has to be addressed as soon as possible, right? So I hope that they're able to reach a general physician or a pediatrician who realizes the importance of going beyond informal testing, taking a rattle, shaking it here or there, and directing them to an audiologist, or at least directing them to the first step, getting an OAE done, if possible, a BERA. And if we have the resources like Geeti and Ketaki, then refer to an audiologist, trained audiologist who knows how to work with children. That's an obvious. The second problem is that often when parents realize, it may already be 5 to 6 months. By the time they start suspecting, by the time they're convinced that the child has an issue, they locate somebody, they are shuttled from one place to another. And that is why what Geeti was talking about is so important, that we need to have and we need to advocate for neonatal hearing screens. It is so important that all of us who are working in the field of childhood disability advocate for neonatal hearing screens. It is really shameful if something that can be worked on is not available. The reason for early identification is obviously that we need to move for early intervention very, very soon, right? Because we know that outcomes are related to how soon we intervene. And, you know, for those who have severe to profound hearing loss, more often than not, and Geeti and Ketaki, please correct me if I'm wrong, but for them, a hearing aid doesn't really work. And many of them will have to take the decision, the parents will have to take a decision about what is their choice of communication for the child. Do they want to go for a cochlear implant or whatever, you know, the future holds, or do they want to switch to a more sign language therapy? So early identification has to be tied into early decision making and early intervention. So it's very important that that step happens soon. तो उनके लिए जो हिंदी में प्रेफर करते हैं, मेरे बोलने का एक ही सार है कि ऑफ कोर्स पेरेंट्स जब उन्हें चिंता होती है, उन्हें शुरू समझता है कि बच्चे को सुनने में देरी है, तो डेफिनेटली ये जरूरी है कि वो उन लोगों के पास जाए जिन्हें छोटे बच्चों में टेस्टिंग, हियरिंग टेस्टिंग करने की एक्सपर्टीज है, उन ऑडियोलॉजिस्ट के पास। और केवल कोई झुंझुनी बजा के इधर उधर कोई उनको बता दे रहा है कि नहीं बच्चा सुन पा रहा है और उससे हम आश्वस्त होके बैठ जाए, हम ऐसा ना करें। और दूसरा भाग ये है कि हम जो लोग ऑडियोलॉजिस्ट हैं, स्पीच थेरेपिस्ट हैं, स्पेशल एजुकेटर्स हैं, ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल हेड्स हैं, जो भी चाइल्डहुड डिसेबिलिटी के फील्ड में काम करते हैं, हमारी और एक जिम्मेदारी है कि हम एडवोकेट करें कि नियोनेटल हियरिंग स्क्रीन हर जगह पे लागू हो, ताकि उन बच्चों को इस तरीके से सफर नहीं करना पड़े।
Yeah, so that was very, motivating, and that was moving, because I can't really imagine if a child is being ignored or detecting hearing loss, then their future might be impacted. The delay of cognitive development and speech and language development might happen if there's a delay in detection of hearing. So over to you, Geeti. What do you think can be done among young babies to recognize hearing loss?
I think the first thing is that when the mother-to-be goes even to their gynecologist or to their hospital setup, for checkups during pregnancy, I think first thing we need to have things like where they're in the waiting room, maybe a video which is talking about hearing, speech and language milestones, so that gets them going. Lots of times parents don't realize that hearing is indeed going to affect the development of spoken communication skills. So they don't realize that if a child can't hear, that a child won't talk. So what we are talking about is that, first of all, the parent awareness has to go up. There are too many times where the pediatrician or a general physician will say that, "Nay, you can't do anything right now, so you wait for 1 year and 2 years." If I look at the families that I've had opportunity to serve, I would say probably 95 to 98%, the child has been tested only because of the persistence of the parents. And they were brave enough to go in for a hearing test and insist on a hearing test. So first is that they need to know what are the typical spoken language milestones and hearing milestones that are there. They need to know at what age a child starts talking. So it can't be that you have these myths, ये जो मिथ्या जैसे हैं कि लड़के देर से बात करते हैं, या वो और उसके पापा भी देर से बात करते थे तो वो भी देर से बात करेगा. First of all, we have to realize that all children, whether they are deaf or hard of hearing, they are like any other child with typical hearing, and they are wired to develop spoken language communication skills. Secondly, that where if we can get them tested early, and not only hearing screening, we need to set up the entire protocol for diagnosis and intervention. Because just focusing on hearing screening, this is not like our polio drops. So I can't just take one a piece of equipment and go in a mobile van and say, I have screened so many children. What happens to those children? What is your rate of follow-up or dropout? What is the rate of further diagnostic testing? All that has to be done with a well thought out program. And the only state that I know that has that in place is Kerala. So I think it's general, awareness that should be done. So whether we have little films, now of course malls and things are out or theaters are out, at hospitals, whether it's in the newspaper, whether it's on TV channels, we need to talk about this at prime time, not at some odd hour when the mother-to-be or the family is busy doing something else. So it has to be something that is at a time where they are available to view it, whether it's on radio, anything.
So I think, you have stressed enough that the newborn hearing is a mandatory for the new to be mom. So, but for the young babies, they have just born. Do you think it is safe and reliable for them to get tested? Because the babies are so young.
So I'm sure that all of us know about the Joint Committee on Infant Hearing that is there, which comprises of a body of pediatricians, audiologists, otolaryngologists, and so many more professionals that are speech language pathologists. And the whole thing is that they have realized a long time ago, yes, in the Western world, that you should be following what we call as the 1-3-6 protocol. So newborn babies, in my experience also, we have tested babies as young as 2 hours of age. They have not even been wiped. They have just been born, and we have been able to do testing on them using standardized hearing screening equipment. So before a month or before discharge, if you can, you need to do this hearing screening. Before 3 months of age, we should be able to follow up aggressively to finish their entire diagnostic evaluation. And thirdly, to begin before 6 months of age or at the earliest possible after confirmation of diagnosis, to have early intervention. So taking a history, family history, birth history, peri, natal history is very, very important. And to have like a checklist. So those who are born at home, we still have daimas who are birthing children in homes in rural areas. And I think that it should go, because hearing is the birthright of every child possible. Unless there is something to do with their hearing nerve, and therefore they cannot have access to hearing, or their cochlea. So I think that the earlier that we can get, I understand that our population is huge. So all the more reason to go about it in a very systematic manner, start up with pilot projects which are dear to the people who are instituting that program. And the main thing is follow up. It's not just starting, it's sustaining the quality of the program. So I can't say, and that's an eternal debate, whether you should do it for all babies or high-risk babies. Now, considering the babies that are born every year in this country, I think that even if we were to screen 24/7, we wouldn't be able to screen all children. But maybe institutes like AYJ can have their students, maybe in the second year or third year of bachelor's, where they can be getting their clinical hours doing hearing screening. So it's under supervision. It is done by an audiologist, and we are training our students the importance of how this can be done, and having awareness programs for pediatricians and for general physicians, that newborn hearing screening using reliable methods can be done at birth. We don't have to wait for 3 months, 6 months, that you can't do anything until a year. Because precious time is lost, as Dr. Koili Sengupta was talking about.
As you know, this time is very challenging. This is the pandemic situation. So it's something which is delaying the process. As you mentioned, the screening, the follow-up, the consultation with the pediatrician, the audiologist, and all the stakeholders. So what is the contribution? What is your contribution towards reducing this impact? Like, how can this impact due to the pandemic situation can be reduced?
So yes, it's very difficult with newborn babies, because you are exposing a child to something. However, I feel that the tests that are done take probably about 30 seconds. And if the mother, I'm talking about first full-term babies, if the mother is going to take 2 days or 3 days before she's discharged, this testing can happen, taking the necessary precautions by the professionals. And the first thing that we have to do is empower parents. For example, when we started hearing screening at Wadia Children's Hospital, at the maternity hospital in the first period, we had mothers who would fight, who were ready to shout and abuse us, saying that we are just trying to earn some more money and adding one more test. But we continued counseling in the maternity ward, which we can also do via WhatsApp. We have lots of technological advancements now and opportunities. So for awareness. The second thing that we can, the second thing that we can do is, and the most important thing is to empower parents. If we can explain to them the importance of hearing screening and follow-up and the importance of hearing, I think we have won half our battle, because it is in their best interest and their child's best interest to do this screening.
This we have alternatives, like we have a technological and infrastructure connectivity. So even a small word or a small connection over WhatsApp or over any other social media can come a long way to help the child know if they have hearing loss or not. So yeah, I think it's best to look out for the alternatives rather than waiting and watching when the crisis will get over, because we never know when this situation will last. Okay, so we have for you Akansha. So as we know that you are the audiologist, can you shed some light on how, as an audiologist, what are the challenges being faced during this COVID situation, and how do you overcome the challenges that we are facing due to this COVID situation?
Shruti, when the lockdown started, the first lockdown started, and nobody was prepared for the situation, basically. And it was all of a sudden that we had to kind of shut down everything and be at home. So yes, first few days was a real struggle, and we were kind of, making sure that all our beneficiaries and the children with whom we are working, they are all, like, the safety was first and foremost priority for all of them. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that their auditory performance, because the children with hearing loss, they need consistent auditory input. They need consistent, language stimulation. So we made sure that all our beneficiaries, they are getting help from us with telepractice. So gradually we moved on to telepractice, and we started then all our sessions, which can be a parent guidance sessions with the children. So yes, these all the challenges I would if I have to list down, is basically technology, making parent understand the technology, because most of our beneficiaries are from a lower socioeconomic background, from marginalized community, and many of them may not have laptops or smartphones also. So the first challenge was, like, getting familiarized with the situation and getting familiarized with the technology part of it, because yes, the safety is first and foremost thing, but at the same time you do not want your child to not get any kind of a stimulation. So basically managing all the safety guidelines, but yet, like, with the help of technology, we were in touch with them. And the first important thing was to make sure that their devices are functioning all day, every day long, because that is, again, like, when I say consistent input, audio input, so basically you have to take care of your device very nicely, very well, because during this situation even repair was not possible. During this situation, even making molds was not possible, because everything was shut down. So we were constantly in touch with our parents, taking care and maintenance workshop, and helping them with, like, minor troubleshooting at home. So all that we were doing, and we were constantly in touch with our parents and beneficiaries. We were monitoring their auditory performance, using a different checklist, because face-to-face sessions were not possible, and the testing, the using equipments is completely on hold. So the only way that we could do is, basically with the help of parents and their observations, and connecting with them using technology and using all these, platforms, various platforms, whichever way parents are comfortable, basically. So from simple phone call to using, various platforms like Zoom and WebEx and, other technologies also. We tried out all kind of, possible things, whichever way parents are comfortable, to make sure that the child is getting constant audio input, so that there is no interference or no interruption in their learning, basically. and then yes, to monitor their auditory performance, that whether they are progressing or they are, they need any help. So accordingly we were guiding, and it was like again a customized session as well as group sessions also. So that's how, like, we are still facing challenging situation. The lockdown is kind of restricted movement in certain areas. It is like, in certain areas people have started moving out. So again, if any child is requiring, batteries or accessories, or so we are trying to collaborate with other professionals, because I feel it is better to collaborate than compete with each other, especially in this situation where, child or beneficiary is like, should be at the center, and we should do everything and anything to help that and support that child and the family. So we are, trying to collaborate with other professionals also to, support their needs and to provide. And yes, people are supportive professionals, and they are helping out with whatever they can, way they can, and they are going out of their ways for my beneficiaries. So it was challenging, but yes, we have sought out, our ways to kind of deal with the situation.
Yeah, so it's great that the procedures and the testing are being conducted virtually. Even the follow-up are being, conducted remotely, which is a great thing. In spite of shutdown and government restrictions, people are unable to move out of their homes and their place. So it's difficult for them, but it's great that the things are being conducted virtually. Okay, I guess we have a second poll session for you, the participants. Please see. Okay, so the second poll session will be conducted. Yeah, it is in progress. So please answer the questions.
Shruti, just sharing with you that we've got some questions from the audience already. So just if you want to take them now, or we can wait another 15 minutes and take them, whatever, it's entirely up to you. I'm just letting you know.
Okay, okay.
I'm just waiting for us to hit a century on the respondents. Yeah, just give me a second. I'm just going to wait 20 seconds and then close the poll. Okay, it's now closed, and Shruti, I'm just sharing the results for you and the panel.
Okay, so the question was, is newborn hearing screening an effective first steps towards identification of hearing loss? Such an amazing response. Around 94% of the participants has responded in a positive manner. The second question was, should newborn hearing screening should be made mandatory? Again, they have given a tremendous response, is positive. 90% of the participants have responded to yes. So it's great that the participants have, have ensured that the newborn hearing screening should be made mandatory. Okay, so we can start off with the second round of the panel discussion. For you, Ketki, we want to know if there are any government guidelines for undertaking facilities or testing procedures towards identification and detection of hearing loss even in this pandemic situation.
You mean at our institute or in general?
No, I mean to say like there are any government guidelines to undertake
For
the
conducting the
testing.
test?
Yes.
We have come up with SOPs for the empaneled therapists who are enrolled in our EDIP CI program. But as such, for testing, we haven't come up specifically for pediatric hearing testing. What protocol we have been following here is based on the WHO guidelines and ICMR guidelines for general OPD consultation, and few modifications are done keeping in mind to incorporate especially the social distancing part of it. We make wearing the mask mandatory when they are entering in the institute. Temperature checks are done. There are foot operated sanitizers installed at the strategic locations in the institute. And major change that we have done from earlier is that we have restricted movement of parents. Earlier, it would be like when they enter the institute, they will go to one place, do the registration, walk towards another place, do the case history, third place, do the hearing screening, fourth place, speech. So we have tried to restrict that movement and provide all these services in a small periphery. So now most of the moving is done by us. Parents are at one place and they are provided services at where they are, like in either in the audiology room or in the speech room or in the waiting area, wherever we are able to maintain the distancing. For follow-up, we normally encourage them for the first visit not to come with the child because whatever can be done without the child is done on the first visit, or they can call up. The contacts are there available on our website. Uh, so on phone, if we will be first screening like what is the reason of visit to the institute. If we can help them over the phone, that is done then and there, and only if it is absolutely necessary, we tell them to get the child to the institute. So it is basically actual testing only when it is necessary. How much ever is possible, you do it over the telephone or any other platform, that is any other virtual platform. In that efforts, we have made few videos in accessible format in which people can access it and try to compare. A few videos like how to get the child conditioned, or that is already available. Others that we are working on is how to check the hearing, child's hearing, like how to gauge the distance, how you should present the stimulus at home so that you have some idea about what your responses are. And another video we are making is about what is the normal auditory response that is observed in a typical child, so that based on that a parent can compare their child's response and get back to us with their feedback. That will again help us whether it is an absolutely immediately we want to see the child when we started ABR, and we want to see the child immediately, or we can wait for few more days or months to do the diagnostic testing. So that's what we have done right now. And today, what I'll learn, I'll try to incorporate more of it.
As you mentioned that the videos are made in accessible format for the parents to know more about it, could you talk a bit more about where is it available so that the audience can know on which platform are the videos available?
The videos are available on our YouTube channel. So you can search for that, or I think it was released on the Facebook page also. AYG's Facebook page and the ministry's Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment's page. That's our ministry. On that Facebook page also it was released.
Okay, okay. Thank you for the answer, Ketki. For Akansha, we have a question for you. Can you talk about how, say, yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Before you go on, can I just make a request to Ketaki that this link that you're talking about, if a link could be shared with the Save the Children team and they could forward it to all of us, then we in turn could also forward it to other professional organizations like pediatricians, gynecologists, so that more and more families can be, can access that link.
Yeah, right now the only the conditioning one is ready. The one that is with the regular auditory responses of a typical child, once that is ready, I'll definitely share it.
That would be lovely. Sorry, Shruti.
No, it's okay. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Yeah. So for Akansha, we have a question. So how Save the Children India is being instrumental in the area of early identification and as well as detection of hearing loss?
So yeah, Shruti, Save the Children India had recently started with infant hearing screening program since January 2020, and so we've had kind of collaborations with different NGOs and corporations who are working for a similar cause in disability sector or mother-child health program. So we've had types with two such institutions, and we were going in communities. So there are two types of activities that we were doing. So first is basically community outreach activity, where we were going out and training community health workers who are reaching to different people in their areas. So we were training them in terms of the importance of hearing since early childhood, since birth, and how is it crucial to know that there is a hearing loss as early as possible, what impact it can have, and how do we hear, and how if the child is not hearing, then what are the impact not only in speech and language development, but as you said and as everyone has mentioned, that it is overall development of the child. So these were the sessions taken with the community health workers, so that they are aware about importance of hearing and how what needs to be done to check the hearing when the child is born. So about hearing screening as well. The second step was basically going out in communities and doing actual screening. So we have had very comprehensive two-step hearing screening procedure, where we are doing OAEs and we are doing ABR also, automated auditory brainstem response screening also. So we were collaborating it with the immunization camps of at certain places, so that families are already out with their babies to do necessary vaccination. So we used to combine our activity with their schedule. So that is how the response was really nice, where people used to be already aware about they're already aware about the importance of vaccination, but at this time they were equally aware about the importance of hearing screening. And this is a free of cost testing arranged from our organization, so that maximum number of children can be benefited with this. So this was obviously pre-COVID. We've conducted two of such camps in collaboration with immunization camps of that particular area, and so we've had great response. And even people, the parents were turning up for rescreening. That rate was really high. So we were really happy, and it was picking up really nicely. But unfortunately, because of current situation, it is on hold. And as BT has mentioned, the priority, yes, is of course is health. But at the same time, as soon as we are kind of gradually out of the situation, we would definitely want to get back to this. Because this is something really crucial, which my organization has started, and we want a maximum number of children to be benefited with this facility.
Thank you so much, Akansha. Now we have the questions from the audience. Okay, let me just Okay, so the question we have is, please guide. Sorry, just a second. Na? Okay, we have a question from Sonakshi Lawal. Hi, just curious to know at which age did Shruti get implanted and begin her therapy? Okay. Okay. It was in the year 2007 when I was around 10 years of age. I was implanted with cochlear implant surgery. But this was obviously late implantation because it was at a time where being from a small town, we were not aware of the existing technologies that can boost our hearing. So it was because of the lack of awareness of the technology and lack of information about cochlear implant. I was implanted later at a late stage, but before that I was constantly wearing hearing aids, right at the time when my parents came to know about my hearing loss. It was I would say that the unconditional acceptance is what the parents took to accept that okay, their child, which is me, is having hearing loss, and they have taken the immediate action of fitting me with the hearing aid. So basically I was active hearing aid listener. So it's because of the support of my parents, my this family, therapists, audiologists, all the stakeholders were involved in the process of getting me hear each and every sounds. And post cochlear implant also, it was constant hard work and constant rehabilitation and determination which made me to achieve where I am today. Yeah, I hope this answers your question, Sonakshi. Okay, next question we have from Vikas Kumar is, please throw some light on selective mutism and some management strategies for the same. If any one of the panelists can answer this question.
I'd be happy to answer. Is that okay? Can I answer, Shruti?
Okay, carry on.
Yeah. Okay, so selective mutism is actually not really related to hearing loss per se. It is more a function of anxiety. So selective mutism is diagnosed when a child who can actually talk finds it very hard to communicate outside a zone of very familiar people. So what we often hear from parents is that, my child is so chatty at home, will talk a lot, but as soon as we step out or they see neighbors or they go to school and they do not say a word at all. So I think many people refer to it as a very extreme form of shyness, but the way we diagnose, selective mutism where I work is because it's very hard for the child to even communicate with me sometimes. So I might watch the child from an observation room and ask the parents to communicate. And then I'm able to see, okay, what is the child's language level and what happens when the child is communicating with familiar people vis-a-vis videos and records of what the child does when he's with unfamiliar people. So the management is definitely not to force such a child to speak because there is extreme anxiety, but as I call it, to slowly increase the circles of communication, understand that there is anxiety at play here, make it a conducive environment to communicate, to start talking about areas and interests that are of special value to the child. So if the child likes movies or likes songs or likes to play with certain things, those could be topics we start conversation with and increase communication around those topics.
Thank you, Dr. Kaveri. Okay, we have more questions. Okay, we have a question from Saraswati. Till today, in lots of places, the neonatal screening is not available. Doctors also guide them appropriately. need to make them also aware. So basically, the places where there is no screening available, what can be done for them to know if there is hearing loss in their children? I think any one of you can answer. Who knows the alternatives where in the areas the neonatal screening is not available?
Someone taking that?
If I may say, the usually hearing loss is associated with advancing age. You still have parents who get asked questions in a metropolitan city like Mumbai that, how come your child is deaf? How come your child is wearing hearing aids? Is your child going to use them for life? So they have no clue. The general populace has got very low awareness about hearing or hearing loss. Unless the ear is not formed well or there is some obvious craniofacial difference. Otherwise, they don't suspect it at all. They put it to things like mood or the child is busy doing something. And if we don't assess the hearing, then the child can be misdiagnosed as something else. Maybe a child with autism or attention issues. Very often they are misdiagnosed. So with hearing screening, firstly, I mean, even if hearing screening cannot go into every nook and corner of our country, at least to get a parent aware of what are the typical milestones in hearing and language development, to make them aware that hearing is important. For example, I've seen sonography reports of mothers who have come to me with their child having a hearing loss. They all have what they call as a malformation scan. There is no mention of the ear. No mention in most of the places. So you look at the nose, you look at the orbits, you look at the mouth, you look at all of that, but there's no mention of the ears. So the awareness, I think, first, and to establish the entire gamut of facilities, not only hearing screening, because once you do not pass or refer on the screening, what next? If that is not set in place, what are we going to do? And how are these families going to follow up, and where are they going to follow up?
Okay, so I think it's not that just the neonatal screening is the only way to figure out the hearing loss in children. There are other procedures to see if the child has defects in them. Okay, so we have another question. Newborn hearing screening is important to address congenital hearing loss. What form of advocacy can really make it happen in a huge country like ours and across all sections of society? Okay, so I can talk a bit more about it, and then if any one of you can answer, then go ahead. So for me, what I feel is if you want to make, so the first step is the awareness and the visibility of people or students or children, whoever as hearing loss. So thing is, unless we make people aware of what all situations are, meaning what could be the impact or what could be the effects of hearing loss. So if we shed some light on visibility of the effects of hearing loss, so it's when where the parents or where the caregivers know, okay, so if my child has hearing loss and it may happen, so it's best, so like they might get shocked, or they might get depressed, or they might get went out if the child is hearing loss. So it's best that we let the people know that these are the effects of hearing loss, and it can be done in various social media platforms. These days we have Facebook, Instagram, and like we can conduct in the form of webinar like this, or in the form of panel discussions, or anything that could reach out to mass of the people and let them know that these are the effects of hearing loss. That is one thing. Second thing is, if we can have some inspiring stories, if we can have some hearing impaired people who can talk about their acceptance journey from their family, like how family supported the child or whoever the hearing impaired person is in accepting that one as disability. So the acceptance journey and the journey of their hearing loss and procedures that have been taken to boost their hearing. So I guess these two procedures can be done, making the people aware of the effects of hearing loss, and some inspiring stories can be a form of advocacy for all the societies or the sections of the society. If any one of you have the answer, if you would like to add, you can add.
Shruti, I would like to add here that if we keep it voluntary, the screening, it might not be effective all over the country, taking into consideration the diversity and the numbers. So I think all the professional bodies which are concerned with a child, like a pediatrician, gynecologist, audiologist, ENTs, if those professional bodies of these people can advocate it at the government level to make it mandatory, and incorporate it along with the immunization program, that would be more effective. That's what I feel. And institutes like AYJ, NIHH, ISHA, the pediatricians national body, ENTs national body, should take active participation or active role in getting this approved and implemented by the government, both by the central government and the individual state governments also. And as far as immunization is concerned, there is a infrastructure already present. So if we can, train those people to screen for hearing also, and train, make them aware about the places where further diagnostic evaluations can happen, I think it can work out.
Okay, okay.
Shruti,
Yes.
This person actually had put this question on a long time ago, and she's concerned about a wire on her son's cochlear implant and just wants to know, will those wires be available or does she need to buy them all at once? She's also been following up on chat. If anyone can respond to this one, please.
Okay. So this I can understand. It's about the coil and the wire of the implant of CPH02. So I guess it's best to get consulted with the cochlear implant specialist, technical specialist. And I also feel that it's best to keep stock of it. You can have spare wires, because then you never know. Wire is something like a part of a technological thing. So it could have a wear and tear. Even during the monsoon season also, the wire might get eroded because of the deposition of moisture. So it's best that you have spare with you. But also at the same time, it's best to consult with your cochlear implant technical specialist. I mean, from the center where you have gotten your implant stuff. Okay, we have another question. How to deal with parents who thinks that making implant of cochlear will make his child talk, who doesn't understand the importance of speech therapy. Working for 7 years in the school, that parents come and ask, when will my child speak, every time meeting teachers in the school. Okay. I guess the question is more about expectation from the parents, how to meet the higher expectations from the parents, because it is something that is not being achieved within a fraction of second. It takes time. It's a process where you provide therapy and everything. So I guess if any one of you panelists can answer to this question.
I think specific to this particular case, I think there's more to it than just, not believing in therapy. Because 7 years of this parent has been coming to school. There is something else that is going on here. And I feel that there needs to be, I'm sure that there has been an evaluation, but maybe there is something that is not fitting in the puzzle, which is why the parent is having an issue. And I think more information is required before any of us can really comment on this.
Also add, Shruti, I totally agree with Geeti. And while I'm not commenting on this specific child, I want to zoom out a little and talk about, as you said, expectations of families, right? So I think the understanding that many families have is it is this very expensive, magical thing that you fit in the ear and the brain, and my child will start to hear, right?
Yes.
And families, I have met families who've sold their gold jewelry and their farms to enable a child to get a cochlear implant. So you see the expectations from it are huge.
Got it.
So, while a cochlear implant has almost, remarkable results, but not for every child, not at every age, and not in every situation. There are so many conditions that impact outcome from a cochlear implant, including but not limited to age of implantation, the cognitive level of the child, the amount of input that goes into it, right? And I wonder if all this is explained to the family before they sell home and hearth to go for the cochlear implant. So, I mean, I'm a mother, right? And my job is to think, what can I do to make the world a good place for my child? And this is what we say to me. Often we say that parents live in denial, they don't accept. We say that parents live in hope, because if you take hope away, then there is very little to live for. So the parent keeps hoping that this child will talk, this child will talk. It's our job as professionals to provide realistic hope to this family, that given this situation, this is what we can hope this child will be able to do, and this is what we can support, right? So it's not a clear yes or no question that the child will or won't talk, because I've also heard many families come away with the impression that my child will talk. Aaj nahi to 20 saal mein to bolega. And that's not how it works out.
I would like to add here is many a times when a professional is telling them about what to expect realistically, if another parent who has similar factors tells, it is more effective. So making parent talk to another parent of another child who has similar factors affecting the outcomes, that does help. So arranging for a meeting with similar parents is also an idea for parents to realize what is their role when they are opting for a cochlear implantation or any particular intervention way.
Yeah. The key word there being similar, because you may meet
Yes.
the parents of a child whose outcomes are excellent, and that may not be what your child may end up having.
I think I'd like to add that this starts from the time that a parent walks into a center, that it takes a village to raise a child. And in that village, for us, we have audiologists, field level pathologists, neurodevelopmental pediatricians, pediatric neurologists, psychologists, ENTs, and at the center, and many more. And at the center of all of this is the family, who has to make informed decisions. We don't make the decisions for them. So it starts from that point on. If they make an informed decision, that means we have to do the appropriate counseling.
Okay, so we have another question. Geeti ma'am, it's for Geeti. Geeti ma'am, can you share the protocol of hearing screening at birth? Which tests can be done at the time of birth?
So the places where I have been involved with hearing screening, and I'm sure that Ketki would agree to that, is that we are using only electrophysiological means to do a hearing screening. The word screening itself means that you should get just two answers, either a pass or a refer. We are not going into diagnostic testing. So, if you look at what the JCIH is saying as of 2019 also, they are talking about a two-step procedure, especially for babies who are NICU graduates. So, उन बच्चों के लिए जो NICU में रह चुके हैं हॉस्पिटल में, उनके लिए two methods that have to be used. So it cannot be that we do just OAEs. So अगर हमने normally OAE, हमने अगर normally hearing screening बोला, so we think only of OAEs. Automated ABRs are not given the due attention, probably because the equipment is more expensive. But if you're truly and sincerely into hearing screening, then it is advisable for any center to have both automated ABR and autoacoustic emissions. So usually we say that for children who are from the well baby, that means they have not had any traumatic or any eventful prenatal or delivery time, any issues, then we say that we can do either an AABR or OAEs. But for babies from the NICU, it is compulsory as far as JCIH to do automated ABR screening and OEs. So it is a two-stage screening process. So that means you do both. You don't do just one and then wait and do the other one. So both have to be done together. And there are differences in what an OE tests and up to what level does an ABR test. And it is very, very important that we do both, especially for babies from who have any high risk factors. And it's important to use standardized equipment, sorry, where you can't make changes to the parameters, where they have automated algorithms so that we reduce either tester bias. So it shouldn't be that with Akansha more babies refer and with Geeti more babies pass, or vice versa. It should not be that from tester to tester you get different results. It should reduce the margin of error. So looking at all of these across whatever conditions, test conditions, testers, whoever that it is, we need to use standardized, calibrated equipment.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's something which we need to follow universally so that it doesn't create any confusion from test center to test center and so from person to person. So it's best to follow the protocol and follow the standardized procedures. Okay, so we have another question over here. As a national institute, what measures do Early Hour Jung take to make compulsion for neonatal screening or is awareness in rural as well as urban area? Over to you, Ketki.
As far as making anything compulsory is concerned, it is the policy to be made by the government. So if any of the question is arised in the parliament or query comes to the ministry, it is normally directed to us and we would be definitely giving a favorable response for the neonatal hearing screening. As of today, as told to me by our director, we are in the process of making universal newborn hearing screening compulsory, at least for the state of Maharashtra, with the help of the local professional bodies. And there is a procedure initiated even at the central level. So for influencing the what do you say, bureaucrats telling them, making them understand that this is the way to go. And one more thing that we have come up understood, or the officials at the ministry have understood, is the EDIP scheme, EDIP CI program that they have launched. If we want that to be a success, we have to have early identification. Otherwise, the children are not going to be detected with hearing loss, and we will not be able to provide them cochlear implant through EDIP scheme in the age range that we have decided in the EDIP scheme. So there is an increased awareness about the need for early identification, and hopefully in near future it translates into a compulsory newborn hearing screening program implemented all over the country.
Thank you for your answer, Ketki. I hope we look forward to mandate and compulsory hearing screening at all the states. With this, I would like to end the questions and like panel discussion. Now, as we have came across all the insights from each panelist, what I feel is the only things the takeaway is the unconditional acceptance of your children who have hearing loss and compulsory screening at the time of the birth. So it was very insightful session. Thank you all of you, the panelists. Over to you, Havovi, for the closing remarks.
Sorry, Farida, all yours.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, Havovi. What a wonderful 90 minutes we have had. And we started where, Koili started with stressing on identification and then helping families make decisions and early intervention. Geeti went on and said how important it is, to make people aware that there's somebody called audiologist who can identify children and put them on the right track. We heard Ketaki tell us about, how AYJ is now relaxed all its procedures to attend to, their OPD, patients, how they are, helping parents to, do behavioral testings, and they have come up with such wonderful videos, the link of which was, put up by Havovi in the chat section. I hope, all the attendees and participants have had noticed that. So, and we went around, seeing how Akanksha spoke about the screening part, especially with the newborn babies, and at the immunization centers, at the health centers that she conducted, and how helpful that has been. And something that emphatically that we spoke over this few minutes is that importance of identification, and then helping the families, supporting them, counseling them, and then empowering, is these are the things that have really come up, and very emphatically this has come up, that we need to support them, help them to go to the right places. In the last I think chat that Ketki said, let's reduce the margin of errors that are happening in between. Parents are made to run from one end to another, and they still don't know what to expect from the professionals. So we need to follow all these things, and hopefully as Ketki mentioned, if some mandate comes in place where the neonatal screening becomes mandatory for all the children born, so let's keep that hope alive, and hope that that comes in place. But till then, what comes to my mind, and what comes from this conversations today, is that three things. One, we all, of the participants who are present over here, most of them are, professionals, audiologists. We need to advocate this. We need to bring some kind of an advocacy. We need to spread awareness. That's the most important. Let's spread awareness about this and educate the parents, educate the most vulnerable, and make accessibility possible in however way we can for the intervention part of it. And that brings us, and to remind all the participants and everyone, next Thursday we are having continuing this conversation on very, very important topic of early intervention. That's happening on 23rd again, Thursday, coming Thursday. So I am requesting all of you all, so don't miss that. And I think that's going to be another conversation to know how we can, reach out to so many who are misguided, who don't know. And the best example we have, of Shruti with us today, who was, a late, implantee, but what a wonderful, and charming lady she's turned out to be. And this is, I think, best example today we have in front of us, when the family comes together, when professionals come together, and a little girl or a little child is helped, and what really comes out of it. And to close with what Shruti started, these little children are the foundation of our future. So let's, hope and make this future really, really bright for all our children. We have, I think, had the last poll already, and we are also going to have some feedback after this. So I request all the attendees to please, respond to the feedback. And I really thank you, Dr. Kohli, for giving such wonderful, strategies and talking about cases and families. Geeti, for giving us how the screening needs to be done and what she's doing. Ketki, such wonderful, talks about what government is trying to put in place. Akanksha, thank you so much, and I think that there are some requests for some parents who are asking us that they did not get the wires and things like that. We have already put our, link there. We will share the email address also, in case any of the parents need to get in touch with us. Do get in touch with us, and whatever way we can help you, we will surely try to help you. And with such wonderful people on the panel and their expertise, we will come back to you panelists if there is any queries that the participants have raised, and if they need any answers to it. Thank you very much for being here. And we continue this next Thursday, 23rd, same time. So hope to see you all there. And to all the participants, I like to request, please, put in your email addresses so that it's easy for us to reach you the certificates. Thank you so much, all of you on the panel, and have a great evening. Stay safe, till again. And we hope that we can all together, make some difference, and be in touch with all of y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Lovely opportunity to meet everybody. Thank you, Geeti. Thank you, Ketaki. This is great. Akanksha, thank you so much. And Shruti, what a pleasure knowing you. Well, we hope we meet again sometime.
Yeah.
So much to learn. So much to learn. So on behalf of STCI, the trustees, the members, the team members, everyone, thank you one and all present here for, spending so much time with us. It was such a joy. Thank you very much.